You want to call the meeting to order or me? All right, I'll call it. This is the Willington Board of Education Curriculum Committee. It is February 7th, 2024 at 4:17 PM. We only have one item on the agenda, that is to review the state mandated ELA curriculums. So if you're okay with it, I'll just let Kristen Stevens start, who is our literacy coach. And she's got a presentation to share and loads of materials for you to poke around at, so. It's all you.
Okay, can you share my screen? Hey, hello. Thanks for being here. All right, so this is our literacy program review. So just starting out with why we are purchasing a new literacy program. It's a state mandate, so for our district is required to implement a program for grades 3 through K through 3. That is a state approved program by the Connecticut State Department of Education. And the state programs, what they have, what our current curriculum does not have. They have systematic and cumulative instruction of vocabulary, language skills, and reading comprehension. There is an assessment and remediation system for all the tiers in special education. And there is systematic building of content knowledge. While we have that to a degree in our current curriculum, it's not as systematic and cumulative and encompassing as it needs to be. So that is what a new program would provide for us. So the research and selection process. So the first thing that was done was the list of programs that are approved by the state. Those were compiled into a list. And then every single company, publishing company for those programs was contacted. And every single representative from all of those companies was spoken to at length. And then those representatives sent digital samples, print samples, and all of the samples were looked through for multiple hours. So there were multiple hours spent on every single program. And then follow-up questions were asked of the representatives, more conversations were had until we felt that we had enough information to start thinking about enough information to start making a selection. So once we had enough information, we well, part of the process also was going to other districts, talking to other districts, and just combing through different pages where teachers were making comments about things and seeing what the teacher feedback was from other places who are implementing these programs already. And then once that was all finished, then we also solicited feedback from the CES staff and the HMS staff. So even though this is a K-3 program that we are needing to purchase, we are looking at the possibility of making this a district-wide endeavor. It just seems to make sense if we can do that. So that's why everything was also shared with the Hall School staff and the fourth grade. So after the programs were reviewed, they ended up falling in two buckets. Bucket one was there's the programs that were, so they were more like from publishing companies, very heavily published, but they're like a lot of those were very much the same. They had all the bells and whistles, every single thing that you could possibly imagine they had, and then some, like everything but the kitchen sink. And they came from companies that, well, they're publishing companies first, and they might publish dozens and dozens and dozens of different programs. Not necessarily a literacy company, a publishing company. So the foreign bucket one, that's what those all have in common. Bucket two, those were programs that started either as nonprofit organizations or educational researchers starting programs that were not originally published, or teachers starting them, and they built over time until they either a publishing company came and published them for the group that had the program, or they published them on their own. So really there's like public bucket one is the publishing company bucket, and the other bucket is teacher, almost like grassroots, teachers created, started from educators, started from educational research first, where the other ones were from publishing companies first. what the big difference was between the two, was that bucket one, there's so much stuff in there. It's almost like more than you need, a little overwhelming. Bucket two, comprehensive, but, just very clear. They made sense as far as the way they were built and the rationale behind them and how skills built on one another. So the feedback on all of these was also heavily considered. We talked to other districts about all of these programs. And bucket one, the publishing ones that were very heavily published, there was, the feedback in most of those there was definitely some positive feedback. There was a lot of feedback on how difficult they were to navigate and just the fact that there was some clunkiness and some confusion on how they were put together. Where bucket two, it was a little more clear, and I felt that way too. I could tell, when I was going through those programs, I could see their vision. I can understand how it grew over from grade level to grade level. But American Reading Company, that one, as I went through, that wasn't comprehensive enough. The lessons were not really clear enough. So it didn't give it wasn't that much of a leap from what we already had. And then Great Minds, Wit and Wisdom, almost like the opposite, like almost too much, and as far as too detailed. And that's also that I know a lot of people personally who have started to use Wit and Wisdom and then are not using it anymore and chose another one of these programs on this list instead. So that just makes me nervous. And then the Open Up Resources Bookworms, that gets a lot of great feedback. But the issue with that program, and we did look at this one more than we did most others, and same Wit and Wisdom also, Great Minds, Wit and Wisdom, they require that you purchase that program, and then you have to purchase another piece from another company, and another piece from another company, and a piece from another company. Those are called compendiums that they had on their list. And again, then that's doing a lot of what we're already doing. We have all these different pieces that we're trying to put together right now in our current curriculum to make a whole, and we're feeling like that is not as effective as actually having something that's comprehensive and all encompassing. So the last one, Amplify Core Knowledge, Language Arts, so Amplify CKLA. That program, extremely comprehensive, but very easy to follow. It started with an educational researcher back in the 90s. It's been building and building and building over time and improving over time. There's a tried and true to it. So that program stood out to us. So that is the program that we're going to present to you today, because that one for us, for our district, is head and shoulders above the rest of them. So this is other reasons why we highly recommend Amplify CPLA. So it's started with the Core Knowledge Foundation, and the mission of the Core Knowledge Foundation is to build knowledge. And there's a growing body of research that one of the most important things you can do to affect reading comprehension is to build systematic knowledge. And that is exactly what this program does. So from pre-K all the way up through 8th grade, the topics are similar, but they build at an age appropriate level from grade to grade to grade. This program could have a widespread impact in the district. It can be used there. Grades pre-K through 8. Intervention, it can use this as well. Special education, and it's also science and social studies could also be involved in this. So it really can impact just about and improve every single piece of instruction in our district. It is very comprehensive. It includes instruction in all areas of literacy, very strong reading comprehension, writing, vocabulary, language skills, grammar, phonics, spelling, word study, and again, that building of knowledge. And the instruction is so incredibly cumulative. It's very clear how from pre-K through 8th grade that the knowledge builds, the skills and the knowledge build from lesson to lesson, from unit to unit, and from grade to grade. And it's also very accessible. So, I'll explain like the difference between CKLA and Amplify CKLA. There is a difference, or core knowledge and Amplify core knowledge. But core knowledge has most of their materials online for anyone to see at any time. So there is an updated version that's a little different than what's online, was what we're being required to purchase. But it's not so different that if someone were to go online and would like to see, you know, what we're teaching at a certain time, then they could see that. There's some things that are not exactly updated, but it's so close to it that it's just the accessibility is really nice.
Hold on one second, Kristen. The piece that we had conversations about in the beginning, where they have the approved list of programs and then the compendiums. The compendium was like 4 or 5 different programs that they said, if you use all 4 or 5 of these to get together, you are approved. So, but they are not building any more compendiums. Whatever they got in, that's it. So they presented like 3 or 4 or 5 options for compendiums, and she talked about bookworms before. Like that was, you had to use bookworms, you had to use foundations, you had to use like 4 or 5 different things. The issue with that for us was you had to blend them together yourselves. The issue I personally had with it was the compendiums were built because they asked the publisher, will your program work with this program? Well, in my opinion, if I'm a publisher and I have more chance of being purchased, if I say yes, I'm gonna say yes. So the compendium piece for me kind of was more like what we are currently doing and what we built. It was harder because you're pulling this piece and this piece. You know, you look at the books on the table today and you go, okay, today, when you teach your phonics lesson, you need to use this. When you teach your fluency lesson, you need to use this. When you teach comprehension, you're gonna pull from over here. So this gets away from that. The other thing that Kristen said that's really important is that the state only approves certain years of programs. So when she says CKLA, it's CKLA like 2022. It's a very specific year. It might not be CKLA 2018. So they listed the exact publishing year. That they may continue to add to the one publisher list, but they're not building any more compendiums, is what the state told us. I think that's important to know as we share this out, so you know, like, hey, we wouldn't have to go and pull from 5 different programs. You'd be targeting one.
More efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, so, Amplify CKLA in depth. So there's core knowledge CKLA and then there's Amplify CKLA. So core knowledge CKLA is the original. And then Amplify is a publishing company. So core knowledge CKLA is the original nonprofit organization. All of their materials are available for free online. And then Amplify came in and amplified parts of core knowledge. So they amplified the kindergarten through 5th grade language arts. So if you were to go to core knowledge website right now, you'd see the not updated version of K through 5, but everything else has not been amplified. So if you want the Amplify stuff, you got to work through Amplify, and that's what we're being required to purchase from the state, is the Amplify CKLA. And this is the program structure of K through 5, Amplify CKLA. So, all right, so the way that it works is that there are 2, for kindergarten through 2nd grade, there are 2 strands. So they teach a skills strand, so that's 60 minutes of skills that they would get, and I'll get into what the skills are in a few minutes. And then there's a knowledge strand, so there's 60 minutes of knowledge, 60 minutes of skills for K to 2, 60 minutes of knowledge, and then for 3 to 5, it's all integrated. So they wouldn't, there's not 2 separate parts, because, you know, once they're done learning the more of your basic phonics skills, then they start going into more advanced and integrated skills. There's just the lesson lengths, so you have, 60 minutes of skills, like I said, for K-2, 60 minutes of knowledge. Third grade has 120 minutes combined, it doesn't have to be in a block, you just figure out how that would work best. And then, grades 4 through 5, there is 90 minutes, and again, it could be split up, just depending on, schedules and schedules.
You're gonna have access to this full presentation, by the way.
Okay, that's what I was gonna set up the end.
You will, yeah. Because there's a lot of links in here that, you know, should just give you the overview and let you poke.
So this is how, the knowledge, it's a little tough to see, but you will be able to take a closer look when you have the presentation. But this just shows how knowledge builds K-8. So, in blue, those are, literature, they're literature connections, that's just an example, but there's, kindergarten, there's stories, in grade 1, there's stories and fables, grade 2, Greek myths. In grade 3, they introduce some classic tales, the Wind in the Willows and so on. The green, that is, history connections across the grades. So in kindergarten, they, in a language arts unit, they will learn about, colonial towns and townspeople while they're building language arts skills and learning language arts skills, also learning about colonial towns and townspeople. Grade 1, Frontier Explorers builds upon that. Grade 2, Westward Expansion builds upon grade 1. Grade 3, Early Explorations of North America builds. And then it continues to build up through 8th grade. And then there are, the science connections, just an example. Kindergarten, 5 senses. Grade 1, the human body. Grade 2 also studies the human body, just the next level. Grade 3, also the human body, just at a 3rd grade appropriate level. And that's just examples. There's many different ways there's many different threads throughout the grade levels where knowledge is built.
Thus the importance of pre-K-8, right? Preschool through 8th grade, having a consistent, not just thinking about this from a kindergarten through 3rd grade approach, because that's where our grant funding is, but looking big picture here, what's it look like pre-K through 8th grade?
And I would say that is probably the biggest difference in what we're currently doing, is that whole knowledge building piece that we are integrating intentionally and systematically integrating science and social studies into language arts. So it's happening at the same time. And typically and historically, science and social studies gets pushed to the side. There's not enough time. And if you do it all at once, then it's very efficient, 1, and 2, just the fact that building knowledge is so key to reading comprehension and just success in general. That this is it's very efficient. This is just an example of what you would find in a 1st grade kit. So there are teacher's guides. So in the knowledge strand, a 1st grade teacher would get a teacher's guide for each unit. So it's not one big guide, it's each unit, they have a new guide. Then there's also, activity books. So for that, so students would have activity books. They would get 1 book for the first half of the year, and they'd get another book for the second half of the year. The skill strand, so there would be 7 for 1st grade, 7 units, so 7 teacher's guides for each, unit. There are, big books for 3 of the units. There's large letter cards or sound cards. The student materials, they would get an activity book for each unit. There are also readers that come with each unit, so there would be a set of readers for each student that would come with each unit. And then there's just other materials like, vowel code books and consonant code books. And those are very much like, our current phonics program. It would be like, that's their version of their sound wall. And then there's the digital experience. So there's a digital experience for teachers, there's a digital experience for students. So everything that teachers have that's in hand, they also have that online. And then anything that's not printed, they have also all kinds of other resources that are in the digital teacher experience. And then for students, there are lots of different things that students can do too. There's an opportunity for students if they need audio, they can access audio of a lot of the materials. There's something that is like Alexia, that we use now, or that's where it's, kind of like online, like gamified phonics. And it also collects data on students, and they have their own, which is called boost reading. So there's, lots of different, there's a lot of different components to this program.
This would be where, when we talk about budgeting, and Chris and I have had this conversation about looking to see. There's potential for certain things we have now that would be phased out. So we pay for Lexia, but
Right.
if this is just as good and it's part of what this is, why would you pay for Lexia?
And we pay for something called Newsella and we could use ReadWorks, which is paired with, and they have a scope and sequence for ReadWorks, and they put all the ReadWorks articles, many ReadWorks articles, and put them with what units they would fit in grade levels. There's a lot of things that we use that this could be more of a one-stop shopping, since it has a lot of things that we already are paying for. Same with, it's an additional purchase, but it would mostly, what we would fit with the grant is the M-class assessment. So that is the same as the Dibbles assessment, which is what we use. And right now it's printed materials, and then you enter the data into Google Sheets. And in this case, you could enter the information online, and then it goes into a spreadsheet, and then you can manipulate the data in many ways. A student will have their own, you'll have a student dashboard if you want to go to Tracy Anderson's dashboard, see all of her data, and then look at suggestions for lessons that you could use with Tracy, then you could do that.
It is so fast.
Do you have
We've been
experience?
using it this year compared to last year. You test the kids and instantly you have their scores. You don't have to take the time to enter it all, and you don't have all the paper.
We've been doing that for years just because it's the easiest financial way to do
That's
it.
what we did too, but we finally
Creating our own
put it through, and
spreadsheets,
it's so fast.
sorting,
Yeah.
locking spreadsheets, so people don't.
And teacher feedback, I mean, it's kind of a little bit outside of the conversation, but teacher feedback. This was the first benchmark where there was a second, we had mid-year and beginning year. And the teachers went in and easily were able to find out their information and came to us and said, okay, what does this mean and what can we do?
Right, it'll improve conversations,
That's,
like, so, I mean, that's something that will really,
Because you can actually see the students' answers within your sheet.
that's,
And the teachers can go right, that data is.
it's another plus of this.
yes, for sure. And just to show you the grade 3, because it's combined, they don't have as many components. So there's 11 teachers guides and there's not a skills and there's not a knowledge, it's all combined. So there's 11 teachers guides, there's spelling cards, and those are instead of sound cards, so they shift the focus to spelling. And then, activity books for each student, and then there's a reader, so for every unit, each student would have a reader as well. They do, teach cursive in 3rd and 4th grade, so they'll have a cursive, activity book. And I don't know a ton about the quest for the core yet, but it's one of the, it's a unit that is, it's an engaging kind of unit, it's just a different structure. Threw that in there to just, a little jazzy, I think. And they also have the same digital experience and class of the other things. So if you, just to give you an idea of what the teacher's guide looks like, I just took some snapshots of, hold on. All right. So here's the cover. This is unit 5 of grade 1. And there's just a table of contents, and it lays out what the each lesson will look like. For the most part, the lessons follow a structure. They're not exactly the same every day, but the components, there's a certain number of components, and then there's a combination of those components every day, but it's pretty similar every day and there's similar routines every day. So, most units will start with foundational skills. And here, if you probably can't see, it's pretty small, but it's, segmenting and blending 2-syllable words or sound dictation, spellings for b. So that would be an example of what they would do for foundational skills, and it's, 15 to 20 to 35 minutes, depending on what they're doing. And the activities are changing, so even though it's a long time, they're going from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, and there's also suggestions. And when's a good time for you to take a break and get up and move, and here's some things that you could do. There's also, along with, in the skills, there's language component too, so, that would be where spelling would come in, parts of speech, there's plural nouns in here, root words, statements and questions. So there's the phonics piece in here, that's foundational skills, and then there's also language skills that are incorporated into the skills block. And then, in a teacher's guide, there is a unit overview in the very beginning, and it's multiple pages. I just put what the first page is, and it gives all the information that you need to know about the skills. So it's sort of like we did our letters training, the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, and it teaches you all about the structure of our language. This is sort of like that, but just for this specific unit. And then here, let me make sure I'm missing a page, but maybe not. All right, so these are, this is where the introduction to a lesson. And so it shows you what the objectives are, so the primary focus of the lesson are the objectives, and then it gives you what assessments that you'll be using. And then it has a lesson at a glance. So what the grouping looks like, if it's whole group or small group or partner work or individual, the amount of time that part should take, and then a checklist of the materials that you would need. And then also lays out what advanced preparation a teacher would need to do for the lesson. There's a couple of pages of that, that's just the first page. And then here on the right side, that is the lesson. And so again, it says what the objectives are, and then there's 5 minutes of sound riddles, and it bullets out what the teacher will do or say. What we do like about this is it doesn't script exactly what to say in quotes. It just says, tell this, explain this. So sometimes if it's scripted with the exact words, it kind of takes away a teacher voice, and it also it kind of jumbles the brain a little bit. So we really like, and that's what other teachers who have looked at it really like, the fact that it bullets out what you should tell, what you should ask, and without saying exactly what you should say, unless there's certain procedure where the wording is very, very important, then they'll tell you exactly what to say. Let me just go back for one quick second. So there's a foundational skills part of the lesson, and then in this next part of the lesson, there's a reading. In the skills units, there's a separate reader for each unit. So this is a lesson for the reader that goes with this unit. And the readers are also content-based. So this reader is about a Native American child. So they integrate, even in phonics, they're integrating the content. And so in this reading, so they introduce the story, they preview spelling, they preview vocabulary, set a purpose for reading. And these are all 100% decodable books. And then there's, at the end or during the reading, there would be literal questions, inferential questions, and evaluative questions. So throughout all of core knowledge, you'll see that over and over, no matter what, if it's skills, or if it's the knowledge strand, or if it's the social studies unit, or if it's the science unit, there's literal, inferential, and evaluative questions all throughout. And then there's take-home material, which is optional. And then one of the best things about this is at the very end of every lesson, there's a few pages of additional support. So when you're done teaching the lesson, in this particular lesson, there's also 3 opportunities for assessment. So you look at your assessment data, and you have students who need some additional support. Instead of just going back and redoing what you've already done, you can pull lessons from the additional support. And that's just one piece. There's other pieces that are not in the manual that are in the online resources where you can find even more lessons to support, to support. I mean, there's so many different places that you can look to get additional lessons should a student need either enrichment or more instruction. And these are just examples of the student book page. So over on the left, that's there's a punctuation activity. Then on the right, it's questions about the decodable text. All the assessments are built in, so there's a spelling test in the student book, and so then the page is torn out after the test is done and then given to the teacher. And then here is just an example of a language activity on the right. And then that was a skills, that was an example of a skills teacher's guide. This is an example of a knowledge teacher's guide. So this is grade 1, unit 4, early world civilizations. Here's a similar structure. There's the table of contents, and the way that these units work is that there's an introduction of a read aloud, then there's a read aloud, and there's some sort of application that is usually involved in some sort of response or writing. They call it application for the first couple of years, and then they start calling it what it is. And then here is on the right, this is the introduction to the lesson, has the it has the different objectives and then the assessment that will be in there. And then here's this, like the skills, there's the lesson at a glance. So shows you whole group, independent, small group, how much time it's going to take, what materials you're going to need. There's in the middle, there's just a good opportunity to take a break. And then over to the right, that's the beginning of the lesson. So it shows that in every knowledge unit, the first lesson is a domain introduction. So they activate that background knowledge that they should already have about the topic from either earlier in the year or previous school years, previous grades. And then this is just an example of the first thing they're going to do is there's a read aloud, so setting a purpose for listening. And in the younger grades, it's the way the read aloud works is the image is either there's cards that you either can hold up or you can project them through the online resources, and the teacher reads from the manual. The words are not actually on the picture. So for the first, until they can actually decode all the words that would be on. That's just an interesting approach, but I think I like it. Then there's the comprehension questions. Again, you have your literal and your inferential questions. Check for understanding. There's a lot of different kinds of think, pair, share. There's a lot of different kinds of routines that they use. And then there's some vocabulary work with words that are in the text. And then here's to the right is the application. So in this case, they're filling out a graphic organizer about Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. And then these are just examples of what you might find in an activity page in a knowledge.
Thoughts, questions, just going through a lot of stuff.
Saving mine for the end.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to, what I just showed you, those were Amplify CKLA. Those were Amplify CKLA units. And so again, like Amplify CKLA is kindergarten through 5th grade language arts. That's what we need to purchase. That's what the state is requiring that we purchase. So there is a core knowledge started, core knowledge has everything else. So just to show you, let me just go back to make sure. So this is where you would find your pre-K, your grades 6 through 8. There's also fully written top to bottom social studies units and also science units that very often pair with the reading unit, so it would give you more, like, so if you're teaching about Mesopotamia or in reading, writing, you might also have, you would also have a unit on the same topic that really addresses almost from a different lens, more of a content lens or an extension lens, so you could see possibly teaching about Mesopotamia from a reading and writing lens during like the day in our schedule now later on is the content block, or they could extend with the materials from social studies or science unit in core knowledge. So let's just first go to grade 6 through 8. So if you were going to, anybody can go to coreknowledge.org and go to download free curriculum. And you'd be able to see the not updated units for kindergarten through 5th grade for language arts, but you would be able to see exactly what we'd be using for grade 6 through, for the most part, like, pretty close to exactly what we're using for 6th grade through 8th grade. And so I'm gonna go to language arts. Why am I not finding it? There it is. And then I'll go to 6th grade. And then this is what you would find. These are all the units. Units 1 through and units 1 through 7. There is an 8th one. I think there's another page, but then there is an 8th unit. And I'll just click on one. So you just click on one, see what you can. We'll go to the heritage of each. No, let's go to the Iliad and the Odyssey and other Greek stories. And then if you scroll down, all the way down to the bottom, there is a student reader. And then there is an activity book, and there's a teacher's guide, which is exactly what you saw with Amplify. They just look a little different because it's published by Core Knowledge. And so, go to the teacher guide. There we go. So this is, it's not as fancy looking, but it is also, these lessons for 6th grade through 8th grade were updated from like starting in 2021 and 2022, so they're new. And so it's really just the same kind of, it's just,
Standards.
you know, the standards are there. You'd find that in, I mean, I could scroll through this forever, but just to show you that there are the 6th grade through 8th grade units. You can download the teacher's guide, you can download the students what you're doing, and you can also download the activity pages. So just quickly show you just an activity book.
And one of the things as she does that, one of the things I asked Kristen about, because I have concerns when funding dries up, right? You purchase for a certain number of years, or it only hits K3. With the various programs, if you have to buy things annually, at some point you're using your Fed budget funds to do that, right? Just like I am, we have to, with our illustrative math program, we have to buy workbooks each year. IM allows us to print our workbooks, I think. This is the same way. So if you had a tough budget year, we could sit at a copier and make copy after copy after copy. It's available. That's not the best use of our time. We want to purchase stuff, and especially now, but it's something that worst case scenario, you have the ability to do those things, where some programs won't allow you to do that.
And just the activity pages, like, it's very much like Amplify. It's very similar. There's written responses, Greek and Latin roots, so. And then there's also, I'm not gonna open up pre-K, but there's also pre-K. And then also just to show you quick that there are social studies and science units as well. And we look at these quite a bit. And this time I'll just go to history and geography. And I'll just,
So when Kristen was talking about teacher feedback, she's also gone to middle school teachers on this and shared out, you know, when she says content, she's talking about science, social studies outside, and I think even math has some stuff in here too, right?
Right, and they already have their own program, but there are resources. So, I mean, I don't know what the quality of them, I don't wanna speak to math, I've looked at everything from, so there's also visual arts, so there's, opportunities for integration with art, and there's also music, so there's opportunities for integration with music. The math is the one thing that I've not looked at, because we do have a new program that I believe is going well. So, but it's not my world. I don't want to speak about that too much, but that's the one area that I'm staying away from. But I have met with the curriculum leads for science at Hall School, for science at the elementary school, and same with social studies. Met with social studies multiple times. I've met with social studies curriculum lead at Hall and also at Center to talk about the integration, how this could work for our social studies and science units. And so this is just third grade. These are the examples of the third grade units. And most of them align with their topics that they're in reading. And if they don't, it's because core knowledge has found that that's a gap area, and so they put in an additional unit. It's like, we don't cover this in language arts, but it's important, so here's a unit. And then the science, I'm not gonna open up the science, it looks very similar, but what's really great about the science is that our 6 through 8 units are from Open SciEd. And that's what we're waiting for Open SciEd to finish their units for the lower grades. Core Knowledge and Open SciEd have teamed up. So what Core Knowledge did was they took the Open SciEd units that we already have, and they core knowledgeized them, because I wouldn't call it a criticism of Open SciEd, but it has been as a drawback of Open SciEd, is that there's not enough background knowledge built around science, and there's not enough opportunities for students to engage in the knowledge of science. There's a lot of opportunity to engage in science practices. So what Core Knowledge did was they just over like 5, maybe every 50 pages of a unit, and they also put in like a day or 2 of knowledge for 6 through 8. And then they have fully written units for K through 5, and eventually they'll integrate the Open SciEd, which is what we have identified what we're going to use for our science curriculum. And they are going to merge. So it seems like that was just coincidence. So that's what I found out once we were like, okay, CKLA is probably where we're gonna go. And oh, look at this, and oh, look at this, and oh, look at this. And it was just a snowball effect. And then I would go to somebody and say, hey, look at this. Like, whoa, look at this. It was just really, the connections were just being made. And it's just, every time I talked to somebody or met with someone, there was another connection that was being made, another way it could enhance something else that we didn't even expect. It's kind of cool. And then the other thing too, just the core knowledge sequence is, I'm opening that, I think I'm put over here, no. So basically what I'm opening right now is that, this is the first thing this is updated 2023. The core knowledge sequence, basically what it is it's from kindergarten through, 8th grade, and it put together basically exactly what you need to learn for everything for each grade level. So it would be language arts. So all speaking and listening, that would be, it's also common core aligned for language arts. I'm gonna scroll through this very fast, don't mean to make it dizzy. And then there's, still for a lot of language arts, history and geography. So what you would teach alongside with history and geography in kindergarten, and then, visual arts. So there's, what I found when I was reading the first units of kindergarten is, you have in art, it's you identify and use different lines, straight, zigzag, etc. And then they teach in the first skills unit in kindergarten using lines to form letters and also to draw, because they're drawing so much in kindergarten to learn how to draw. If you don't teach them how to draw, then their writing is going to suffer quite a bit. So there's visual arts, there's opportunities to integrate music, and there's what you taught in music, and then there's the math part. But again, I don't want to speak to the math and science. So, and this goes for every grade level up through 8th grade, and I've just found this really helpful. Just going through this sequence, I mean, it has everything that, this has everything that a student would need to know other than, well, I guess social emotional is integrated. But, everything that content that a student would need to know kindergarten through 8th grade.
Which to me, as we think long-term about report cards, if we do about reporting, which is on our radar, this would be beneficial.
It's just such a great resource. And then I guess the last thing is just what we were talking about, that whole, when, about the M class and the, when you, that's the Dibbles where it's online and then you can put all the data in. And so these are the things that you would, get from that other than, you know, just having the data and having, being able to sort it in really any way you want. That it can inform instructional needs, like I said, like if Tracy, you can go to Tracy's page and you can find lessons that are specifically geared toward Tracy. There's also, that's where they, for the boost reading, that's like the Lexia, the same where it's a gamified skills practice, and you would take, that would take the Dibbles data, or if you decided instead you wanted to do a placement test and then place students where at their level, and then they work through activities online, so it's another thing, another practice opportunity. And then also there is M-class intervention, so that creates very targeted and very specific, almost like mini units for students who need something specific and a specific skill. So it's say, they would say, okay, for 2 weeks, this is what you need to do. So if it's a tier 3 student, this is what they're struggling in, here's your plan for 2 weeks, and then see where they're at. So it's just a great way to, for special ed or intervention. So, we're talked a little bit about what we've done in the past would prepare us to implement this program. So, it is directly aligned to our letters training, the letters, that's the language essentials for teachers, reading and spelling. That training that we spent 2 years on, and every teacher will spend 2 years on that training. This is in the exact direct alignment. So in our previous curriculum, there would be like, well, this doesn't really match our training, we have to revise this part. And in this program, it matches, which makes sense. For what you're teaching probably should be your training. We went through, so everyone was trained in the writing revolution. That is, it's coincidental that the co-author of Writing Revolution also works for Amplify in Core Knowledge. And the thing, we were trained in Writing Revolution, and then we had to create lessons. It wasn't like something where they gave you lessons after you're trained. You still have to create the lessons, but Core Knowledge and Amplify already have those worked in. So we've been trained on how to use it, and now we can, instead of having to constantly create everything, we can create some, but now there's a lot that's already worked in. Our current phonics program, UFly, and our word study program in the upper grades, Essentials, is very similar. The way that it's just taught in a different, it's presented, the content is presented a little differently, but it's not, but it's really, these programs are so similar. If you've been trained in how to teach UFly, then you're real solid for just about any program that has that same philosophy, and CKLA does. And that was my biggest concern, and that was the thing that was a real sticking point for me at first. And then when I started reading the skills units, they're very similar, and then there's so many more resources that go with it. So the current phonics program we love it and it's working well, but constantly trying to search for, we need extra practice to practice. This UFly does not have that, and CKLA Skills has an abundance of extra practice. We spent many years using Readers and Writers Workshop, and obviously there were drawbacks to that, but there were also a lot of positives. And one thing that our teachers are really, really good at, not one thing, our teachers are good at a lot of things, but in this case, our teachers are very well trained in getting to know readers and writers as individuals and how to encourage a love for literacy. And that's and when I've had conversations about CKLA with teachers, that's the one concern, is like, how are we going to make sure that that love of reading and that love of writing is still instilled in our kids. And through the program, looking through the program, reading through the program, just the content alone is engaging, and that's what a lot of feedback from other districts is that, like, the content alone is so engaging. That will instill a love of reading and writing, but also like giving students choice on what they want to read and choice on what they want to write. Making sure that we find time for that, even if it's just a small snippets, you know, here and there, that, but make sure that we are still committed to having kids have that opportunity. And we're good at, no, we're good at that. We've had years of that. And then, in our current curriculum, there's something called, we built in something called structured reads, and we purchased a lot of books to go with those structured reads. And in, CKLA, there are pausing points, multiple pausing points throughout every unit. And they suggest things that you can do. And one of the things they suggest is they have their own trade book pack that you could purchase. And a lot of the books in the trade book pack are similar to what we purchased with our previous curriculum. So we could use those books and the pausing points and the lessons. They would just the lessons need to be condensed a bit, because those lessons that we wrote in the previous curriculum were over 3 days. We don't have 3 days. And also the skills that are in those lessons are already in this curriculum and in this program, but we can still use the texts and a condensed version of the lessons in some capacity. All right, so if you would like to have the opportunity to take a look at what this is like in your hands, what I have here, this is what the company sent. So they sent skills kindergarten lesson unit 8. They sent knowledge unit 8, so it's seasons and weather. Then they have first grade, second unit for skills, and then first unit for knowledge, fables and stories. Then we have unit 6 for skills for second grade, and then unit 12 for knowledge, that's writing for cause. And then in third grade, it's all combined, that's over here, that is the ancient Rome civilization. And then you have grade 4 and a bunch of stuff. That is poetry, and then there's geology, and there's American history. And then we have fifth grade, we have Native Americans, unit 8. And so each one, you have your reader, you have your or your student book, and then there's the teacher's guide. And that's in each set. And then over there on the other side, there's just program guides. The ones on the bottom are 2022, but they're exactly the same. And then there's like the example of a big book and then just some other readers that they sent that didn't go with any units. And then these are just links to important links to the Core Knowledge Foundation website. All of these units that are here, the second link, you can access those digitally from that link. And then the third link is, I showed you a scope and sequence of all of the knowledge, but not language or phonics or those other things. So in that third link, you can see how all those other skills build upon each other. There's so many that I didn't put that in the presentation. And thank you. And any questions?
Do you want to take 5 minutes to poke through items? A couple of minutes to do that? Do you just want to fire off questions? It's up to you guys.
My questions don't really have to do with the pieces here. So it doesn't matter to me how we want to do it.
Maybe ask a couple questions, ask some questions, then look, and then if there's any more questions, ask a few more
Yeah.
questions, and then we're
Mhm.
good? Okay.
You can stop sharing, please.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right, so I guess my first question is, what's the cost of this one?
Well,
So the grant will cover,
100% or?
we're like 99, we think. So the 3-year, we were looking at a 3-year cost with the PD. The grant will cover the entire amount. The price comes down significantly if you buy an extended version, which is 6 years. The grant will not cover that. But 3 years, I think, is solid. And it would give you a chance to go, conversation is really around what's the annual cost, you know, for workbooks, things, what do we need? And that's still stuff we're trying to fire through.
It's not a ton, that's like, I know that to sustain it over time, it's. The exact figure, like I emailed again, the art rep, just so I can get an exact figure, and she said she'll have exact figures for some of the questions that we had in the beginning of next week. But I know that she gave me a ballpark number. I don't wanna say what it is, but it was very reasonable. It was like, I wasn't expecting it. It was like, oh, that's it? Oh, great, okay, like, that sounds doable, but again, like, I don't have the exact number yet.
And my response is for K-3.
Right.
So I have in from the quotes that I've seen from Kristen so far that she's gathered for this. And I think it's in the $50,000 range to add pre-K 4 through 8. So I literally just had a conversation, and I sent out an email today. Because Senator Gordon was asking, his office is asking about waiver and funding, and so I shared kind of where we're at. I think, if this is approved, I could probably do it, pay for the majority of the pre-K 4 through 8 through the balance of what's in our ARP ESSER grant. And that would allow us to do it everybody at once, as opposed to going into an additional budget year, which is a nightmare for professional development training. It's easier just to say we're moving to this and go, and then everyone's having similar conversations around how to implement. And I think with that 50 grand, it would be probably a little bit of the REAP grant, which we get, each fall. And the balance of the art vector answer, which is what I'm looking at right now. That's where I believe it would cover the cost of the balance. We just need to make sure, like, that's still a ballpark.
That's the same 3-year time frame for.
Correct.
And it's just language arts.
Correct.
I guess yes and no, because it is also.
No, I know
social
other
studies,
things,
right?
I know other things are implemented, but you showed on the website, there are specific units for social studies and science, that's
Right.
not what we're talking.
Right,
Okay,
and those were available online, so.
Yeah.
Is the social studies and science that's available online, K-3? That's the most updated?
It's pre-K, well, pre-K actually doesn't have its own social and science, K through 8, the most updated, some of them are 2023. A lot of them are 2020.
When I say updated, I guess it's not like you have to.
Oh, yeah, it's
what's
not
it?
Amplify.
It's-
Amplify does not have science or social studies, they only
So it's
do,
available for free. You can print out anything, and so part of this is about resources, right?
right,
And so that's where I wanna make sure that's clear, is that K-8, if we wanted to integrate anything, we haven't written all of our social studies stuff yet, because the standard just came out, it was just approved by the state relatively recently.
Mhm.
Science has been approved, but we could easily integrate those things in. I don't think it would make sense to do those things unless you approve this, right, or you recommend this. If you do recommend it, I think you'd see a quick shift to go, we're gonna go in and we're gonna find those resources. And start to integrate them in, and it would honestly help us build our social studies curriculum.
okay. Did you encounter other districts that use this?
Yes.
Do you know who they were?
Oh boy, I do know that there are, I didn't write down exactly exactly which district people were from, but I do know that Columbia is starting to implement this, so they had a pilot meeting last year and they're in implementation here this year. I just talked to her recently, the literacy coach or interventionist there. And also, the other, but I actually remember the person, a lot of it's where I know the person, but I don't know exactly where they're from. Trying to think of the other district, I'm just blanking on it, there's a second district that I know specifically where they say that they're using it and it's going well, and then, most of the feedback, just in general, from people I've spoken to or I've just been in contact with, is very compared to other programs, this program is very positive feedback from teachers and from parents, just because there's a lot of opportunities for parents to be involved and to be, to really also, like, this is interesting, kids will go home and a lot of teachers will say, or parents will say, kids will go home and they're so excited about what they learned about Mesopotamia. Like, well, and then parents will like, whoa, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. So there's a lot of, that's where a lot of feedback from parents, so there's a lot of great dinner table conversations or car conversations around what they're learning in school. So really most of the feedback is pretty positive. The only negative feedback that I mean, again, I can't say specifically which district, it's just people that I've spoken to, and I might not even know where they're from. The negative feedback has been that it's a heavy lift, but I've met with all the teachers who are looking at it, like, this is not a heavy lift for our teachers, because we've trained in all the pieces. So a lot of districts will take this and start to implement it, and they're not trained in all the pieces, like we are not trained in the program, but all the pieces that are in this program, we're trained in. We've been trained in everything that this does.
Can you just give me an example? So if you were not trained in U-Fly, it would make this that much harder to implement. If
Yes.
you were not trained in letters, it would be that much harder to implement. And that's where I think what we heard from feedback, or you heard from feedback, was around if you didn't have, this talks about knowledge building, right? Like, we have done our own knowledge building through the writing process, the writing revolution work we've done on letters, all those trainings that we've gotten through really COVID funds that our staff has been through, those things, because now the teachers have the foundation, we believe it's gonna be, they're gonna be able to do it because they have that foundation. Without it, I think we'd have to listen to that feedback and go, ooh, okay, so there's gonna be some really heavy PD that goes along with it.
And we've had other than the PD of an actual program, we've had all the PD we need on how to teach what this is, the content of this. And I don't mean like science social studies content, just mean like, we know about the structure of the language, we understand how the English language is structured and the grammar pieces and all of that. And the other negative feedback has been about, the topics. And again, like, that's a preference and our teachers are really excited about the topics because we have not been able to fit science and social. We spend our schedule is so heavy in math and literacy, and there's not a lot of time for science and social studies. So here we are, it's already here. So I don't see how that would be negative, but there are school systems that found that to be a negative. As far as the negative, that's where a lot of the negative all the negative feedback I've heard is not something that would affect us. Like, it makes all the negative feedback made sense. In other programs, there's a lot of random negative feedback that I couldn't really pinpoint. It's just, but the negative feedback was very specific about CKLA, and it's like, oh, well, that's not gonna be a problem for us. Oh, that's not gonna be a problem for us either. Oh, that's not gonna be a problem for us either.
Well, the reason I ask is, I was wondering if there are districts that are using it and what their scores ended up being, because I'm a firm believer in your curriculum works if it's reflected in your scores.
Mhm.
So if this is tested out when you have no results to it, but there's another one that was up there that had a lot of positive comeback on scores, I'd be wondering why we didn't go with something like that has the backing of this obviously works, to look at the kids' scores. You know what I mean? So.
I'll answer that. This is the push by superintendents. Because the argument that I've had is that it's in the training of you need a good curriculum, but you need highly trained staff. This is exactly what I said to Senator Gordon today. You need highly trained staff. And when you have highly trained staff on how to teach reading, and they have the background and they can listen and watch and teach and provide feedback, that's where it makes the difference. The argument my superintendent group had around this was, it's not the program. There are places that have been implementing some of these programs that are on these lists that aren't seeing results. But they checked all the boxes for what the state required for the state law for a comprehensive program. So this checks the box for a comprehensive program. For me, the continuity, seeing it pre-K through 8th grade, is really important. 2, the integration of science and social studies, really important. 3, that it's got one-stop shopping and not having to go, I gotta pull from this, pull from this, pull from this, was really important. When they did their initial list of programs, Ed Site is in my head, it's not Ed Site, these programs were all rated. So they had the state, when they reviewed these programs, they were rated by 2 different groups. And it's like, one might have been Florida, but do you remember what the other one was?
I don't,
They basically give each of these programs a grade and say, oh, that's a great program, except it's missing X. And that's how the state said you need why the state said you need a comprehensive program. So my argument was because there were some people that were not doing, and this is where the catch-22 is. There's some people that didn't get their waiver, applied for a waiver, their scores are through the roof, they're doing amazing work, their kids are scoring really high. They have to change. Because they're not doing what's seen as a comprehensive program or one of the compendiums. So they have to adjust, so it's like, it was, we have to make an adjustment. But I would say that there was no program on the list that was guaranteeing you're going to get the results if you do this.
I'm not looking for a guarantee, but you can't argue with
I
if this exists and the stores are doing well, something's gotta be working
Yeah.
somewhere. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was my only concern, cause again,
Yeah.
just like the curriculum we had prior, you're going into untested waters and we need
Yeah.
time to figure out if it works. Well, now we have to shift to this one, which requires essentially some more time to make sure that it works and it's gonna do what it needs to do, which is educate kids. So, that was my only reasoning for questioning that, but. If there's not any kind of results, I guess there's nothing else to be looked at there.
I could ask, I think. I think it's important to remove Kristen for a piece of feedback on this from the standpoint of, I can ask Lisa as center school principal to make some phone calls out. You can cause CKLA will give us who in New England is using it. Give us some phone numbers, she can call some principals and say, what's the feedback you're hearing from teachers, what's gone well? How was the rollout? How is professional development, like all those things? How are your scores? What do you attribute your scores to? Do you attribute your scores to the programming and the professional development? Is the program really making a significant difference for you? I think those are all things that are a good addition to the feedback she's gotten, really from, I would call them your peers, other literacy coaches. It's probably where you're getting the feedback, which I really value because it's boots on the ground. It's nothing like buying a program and then a teacher not liking it and they're not gonna implement it the way it's intended to be implemented. So we have good feedback on it, but I think getting additional feedback is not a bad thing. Scores, feedback, Connecticut, Massachusetts schools, if there's any. And then what version are you using? Cause I think that's important too. If you're using an older version and you're saying, I don't like X, well, has that changed in the new program?
and this is a newer version, so that's the other thing too, like as far as. How long, if you're, depending on which scores you're talking about, like it's. As SPAC scores, it probably wouldn't raise scores immediately and it would take time, so you have to think about like how long, if they've been using it for a year, is that going to be good information? If their scores went up in a year, then yes, but if they're about the same after a year, that's kind of tough to say if it's a
Right.
program.
Yeah.
Especially if I think there's gonna be less of a learning curve with this, than most places, even with what we were using before our previous curriculum, but it's just interesting, like, it is a very good question, I just wonder, like, when you ask somebody about their scores, to know, like, what version they're using, and then for how long have you been using it too, like, how long would we expect for that, for it to make a significant impact?
Also say, what do you attribute it to? I think it's important.
And there's other scores too that, as far as, our Dibbles data, that's something that would be also interesting to look at, not necessarily just a SPAC.
How drastically could this change in version to version?
Not that much.
Right, so the reason I ask is because if you've got someone who's using the 2018 version and you know, 3 years later in 2021, things are finally starting to roll and things are going up and up and up. I think that's, you know, a reason to say, hey, this is good, it's obviously working, even if it's not the 2022 version, obviously the version we're using is working, so. You know, if there's not a dramatic difference in the curriculum from version to version, then some generalized improvement would be very, you know, helpful.
Which I think we can probably figure out, if we find out, if we find out from the publisher, when's the last like major overhaul? If they say 2017, then
Twenty twenty-two.
no, sorry, prior to that.
Oh.
So this is the Arthur's point, so
Right.
if there was because there's not a lot of changes in 2022, there were some.
Yeah.
You know, the amplified version took over, if they had a 2017 version. Even though that's not what the state is looking at, that's not really what's important to us. What's important is over the long haul, the last 6 years, if it was a 2017 version or 2018 version. How is what other measures are you using? If you're using iReady, have your scores increasing significantly? If you're using, you know, M-Class, or you're using, you know, SBAC or Dibbles, whatever your data is, how is it going up? We can just go back to whenever that last overhaul was to get the list of schools that are using it and just, I didn't, you know, get some feedback on that. I think we can do that.
Okay. Did you come across this when we were looking for curriculums a couple years ago?
I've known about it for a long time.
So what made you pick the other ELA curriculum over this one the previous time?
That one was before, that was chosen before this was something that was on my own radar. So that would be one of the reasons. The other reason is that overall, this has been updated quite a bit. So as far as like the language arts, it's not a huge difference. They really updated mostly their skills, but they've added so many other pieces. So they're 6 through 8. Middle school is very new. It's about a year old. And then their pre-K, I think, been updated quite a bit. And also their science and social studies, a lot of them are brand new. And they didn't have science or social studies units written from top to bottom at all at that time. So it was a lot less. There was a lot less to it. And also, I'm gonna be honest, that version of me back then didn't understand the importance, and nobody really did at that time, not nobody, but there were less people who really understood the impact of knowledge on reading comprehension. And that's just as we evolve and, you know, we learn more and more about, we learn more about how the brain learns to read, and that's been a piece that's really come to the forefront, and that's where it's been highly recommended that we make sure that we're also focusing on the knowledge piece, because this phonics movement, there's a very big phonics movement right now, and if we just focus on phonics, then that won't, our scores will not improve, or achievement will not improve, and then like, oh, that phonics thing didn't work. Well, that's because that's all you're doing was phonics. So the knowledge piece is the other piece of reading achievement, that background knowledge.
Also, I think the other piece of that too is that there were a lot of people doing Readers and Writers Workshop. We were kind of late to the game for Readers and Writers Workshop, I think. We jumped on after a lot of people were doing that workshop model. And funding wise, I think we could afford Readers and Writers Workshop.
Right, yeah, we could not have,
Without grant funding, I think this would be a really hard sell.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, so
Okay, so then that raises another question, that when that 3 years is gone and we have to fund this on our own.
It's not gonna be the full cost.
Okay,
So, and this is the thing that Chris and I've been working on and trying not to go too deep on the, like, what are the extras are really hard to weed out right now, because there are some things that are extras. There's a lot of this is the one-time purchase.
Hmm.
And then you go into okay, now it's just a workbook each year. You know, every couple of
That's it.
years, maybe you need to buy a new set of books because they're trashed after 6 years. That's typical
Yeah.
operating budget stuff. But the annual cost for me is where I wanna know, you know, and if again. We talked about this with illustrative math when we started printing our own workbooks because we could. It was allowed, and then it was just like, what are we doing? The amount of time we're paying someone to do it, the number of copies we're paying for, you gotta bind them all together. it was cheaper for us just to purchase. So that to me is, I think, and this is even though she didn't put a number, Kristen didn't put a number on it. Before you make a commitment to this, that's what I want to know, as we move forward with getting more pricing, being, more accurate about, hey, after our grant funding is done, what are we really gonna pay? Or what's the estimate gonna be? I'm the honest, I think we pay like $18 a workbook or something for IM, they're not cheap. That, the number we were tossed was a quarter.
She said it and I wrote it down on my notebook and I don't wanna, so that's why I want her to give me something in writing, so I emailed her and asked her to make
So
sure.
that's
with
something,
it. She said it's about $100 per teacher. So, to sustain this. each
For
year.
the class, you mean, or just?
Yeah,
yeah,
so that, it just
Reasonable.
makes me that. To be able to, I don't wanna be quoted necessarily on that, because she told me that, I wrote that down, I don't have something in something in my hand that says that from her. So that's why I'm just reluctant to throw that out there.
Kristen's done a tremendous amount of work, and there's certain things that like, you only go so far, and then when you kind of give your nod, like, hey, keep it going, this sounds really good. We'll get more information, we'll get more dollar amounts, we'll get a lot more specific to.
Right.
This is what we're gonna do, and, again, I think the 3-year timeline is actually pretty good. Cause over 3 years, the first year you're gonna live it, the second year you're gonna go. We don't use this at all, this piece is just extra, we don't need to buy that, and the third year, you don't use it, and the fourth year, you don't buy it again. You buy what you need to use. And that's just the updating of the curriculum process too, it's just the way it works.
And whatever the state decides it wants in 3 years from now.
Correct.
Which we have zero control over, just like this. So there's a lot of unknowns there, yeah.
So there's no writing to this, right? So you're basically, you're taking a whole cloth from what they've done and just shifting and putting it right down in front of you, so, okay, this is this book you follow, here's what they wrote, like, there's no, like, now there's curriculum writing, or there was curriculum writing, like, cause we wrote,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so there would, I guess we need to have a curriculum document, correct? That's what the board would want for us to have. I don't know.
You'd have to adopt something. What we'd have to figure out is, because the current curriculum we made is a hodgepodge of multiple programs, right? We blended them together as best we could with what we had. We'd have to figure out now how people are quote unquote writing curriculum, because you're right, the lessons are there. Does it become a thinner document with a scope and sequence and general things in it, because you're just following the program? What you figure out as you live a program is like, hey, we wish this was a little bit faster, or this was a little bit slower, you might change your pacing a little bit. Depends on your group of kids in front of you. We'd have to figure that out, but that was one of my biggest things that I was concerned about too, is something has to be written, but I don't know it's gonna be as voluminous as
It
what
doesn't have to
we.
be, and I wrote a little one quick, just like a little sample to see what it would, I just took a unit and it really plugged in the standards and plugged in the lessons and plugged in the objectives. And then there's sort of a little blurb at the top, taking from whatever was a blurb that was in this, and then really the assessment's already there, so just put the assessments in there, in the assessment column. And then really what I started to do that took more thought was just making the curricular connections in another column. That was really what was the work, when I was just trying it out, see if we needed to write curriculum around this, like, what would it look like? And it seemed like a process that it was, I don't know, I wrote one pretty fast. Try it.
I like that it's free online. to
Well,
parents.
so I wasn't gonna just keep harping you with negative, perceived negative questions, aren't really negative.
No, they're not.
I do like the fact that it is online. I think it's gonna honestly save a lot of headaches from myself included. That it is available for parents to go look and see and print out their own stuff so the kids can work on it at home if need be. I think that's a big benefit.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is something you may not think of as being a benefit, but I think that's a huge benefit, especially because I know a lot of parents, again, myself included in town, who were down on the limited availability of the existing curriculum, but having this out there, if we adopt this and having it out there, I think it's gonna be a big selling point.
That was the the benefit of her kind of bucket list.
Mhm.
The publishers don't
Right.
allow you, they want you to buy everything they have. The other side, the research people that will put out, give you the information because they want you to teach reading well and do well. That's a pro to us as well. I mean, we want the support and the fact that it's there and they're willing to put it, their amplifies a little bit different,
Mhm.
right? But at least you get the sense and the things are there. That's where I think we'd have to make sure, parents would be connected in that K 3.0.
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
Oh,
I
great,
did.
okay. So you mentioned the cursive part of grade 3 and 4. Is there a handwriting component for pre-K to?
Yeah, I guess I
You were
didn't,
saying the thing about the lines and drawing.
it's,
They have some,
yeah, and you can,
guidance
if
on
you
that.
wanted to take a look, it's in here, it's incorporated in there as well.
okay.
It's for, and it would be what you expect from any good
Mhm.
handwriting program.
Okay, there's enrichment and support. What about ELL?
There is that, there are,
I know you already did this full checklist, Kristen, so I don't even need to ask you probably,
Yeah.
but I'm going to anyway,
No, that's
because
fine.
then it's out there.
yeah, no, ELL, there are, throughout all of the units, there are suggestions on what to do with EL students. There's also a separate purchase that you could, that's actually for specifically ELs, that's more, we needed more.
Okay. For the younger grades, do they offer suggestions for learning centers to do with the lessons, or are we coming up with those?
Not necessarily learning centers, but there's, like, is it, I guess you could depend on how you look, I guess, small group work, yes, so I guess you'd say learning centers, I think. Yes, it's not a center-based kind of program, but there's small group activities, and there are specific ones, like when you're done with a lesson, this is what your small group, these are what your small groups are going to do, it's specific.
Okay.
And there's also, things that you can also choose to do extra in the additional resources, but it is not really center-based.
Right, yeah, okay. Can we technically simultaneously run all of those online pieces in our district?
Yes.
We can handle it.
Mhm.
And I was gonna ask about the necessity and like, do they require us to keep buying the workbooks? Because that's a thing with a lot of programs, they make you keep buying them. And
Yeah.
if you're not necessarily using them all, or there's parts you don't need, that's very frustrating. And a giant enormous waste of money, so we don't wanna do that. Is there fiction and nonfiction in each unit? Because it seemed like it looked to me like there were some that were fiction and then others grade levels that were.
So there would be a unit that might be more fiction-based, but there would, if you go through the units, there's also poetry and nonfiction and all the genres. They do a very good job of representing all the different genres, kindergarten through 8th grade, and they do that in many different ways. So,
Good.
yeah, there's a good balance.
Okay. And then, you mentioned one of the things that, teachers had brought up as, not really a concern, but something that they were kind of looking at was the topic area. Like the human body was grades 1 through 3. And of course, that's something you can build upon, but, and you've looked at it more closely. Did you feel like it really grew and gave them fresh new things to talk about and read about?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say, like, I can't give you specifics about the, I mean, there's so, I mean, I've read all these, I mean, we've only been looking at these, but for a month, I've done a lot of work, but as far as, I can speak generally about, not necessarily the human body, but about topics in general, and any of the topics or units that I've read, where I've looked at the 1st grade and then looked at the 2nd grade and looked at the 3rd grade. It's the way they build the knowledge is really, it's a beautiful thing. It just makes, it makes sense, and where they will introduce something like, they'll introduce something about history in kindergarten in a very kindergarten appropriate way. And then in a first grade appropriate way, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, and they would get more into the issues in the older grades, but they're really teaching them about the content more in the younger grades. So they have a lot of background knowledge, so when it's time to really have some deep discussions about historical periods and whatnot, they're ready for it. They actually have information to draw upon.
Okay, I'm sure that our teachers will have no problem keeping everybody engaged at all the various levels, so, and then the only other thing I was gonna say about, Arthur's question about the standardized testing. A lot of the success has to do with having basic skill, but also knowing how to think critically and ask questions and wonder things and notice things and include detail or notice details. That I'm sure is going to happen through all of our different programs and curriculum as a large piece. But then you were saying about the student dashboard for the assessments that are included in the program as well. You said you could look at a particular student, right? Does it disaggregate the data to show you like phonemically how they did on a certain thing or comprehension, like what the different parts are and how they need to go, how they're doing,
Yeah, and then also what you can do about it.
which is great.
You just click on it and then there's activities and things that are specific to the child.
So that, and do you use that, Tracy? You said it was
Yes, I use
simple.
that black. So when the data comes out, you can look at the individual student, but it also groups it by class. So if you go into, like letter naming fluency, it'll tell you which kids, scores did not meet the benchmark for that. And it will tell you how to group them in your class, and then there's like sometimes 8 tabs of activities. You can go where there's 10 or 15 activities within that tab that tell you how to work with your small groups for that skill. And it tells you where to, it's telling you where to start first, and then once you do some progress monitoring, that's might change for that student, and then it regroups them to, because it updates and now it regroups the kids because they have a different area of need. And you can look at their raw data too and analyze that to say, okay, this kid medial sounds, they don't know, they can't get them. They're getting the beginning and the end when they're blending a nonsense word, but they don't have the middle. So that can give you clues, or if it's a mix up between 2 letters. And then when you get up, so in kindergarten is letter naming. When you get up into 4th grade, it's comprehension and fluency. So it gives you clues about how to work with kids through that too. So we have K to 4, K to 6, but my school's only K to 4, so I don't really know what the 5th and 6th looks like, but.
So you said benchmark, that's 3 times a year, and then the progress monitoring happens in between. So with all of those little milestones along the way, by the time you get to the SBAC time of year or any end of the year assessment, you have seen the growth or lack thereof or backtracking all that whole time. And I like that the assessment is part of the program, so it's not so often different and strange to them. And I love to hear from a teacher that it's really easy to use from her standpoint and gives her suggestions of things to try, a variety of them, it sounded like. And if you can look at a certain student and watch that growth and watch that change and put them in the different groups like that, that's gonna help you all the way with all assessments, just as you have better data collection and know what to do and where to go and how to help the students along. So to me, that assessment piece of it does a lot towards improving scores, in the big picture way.
Yeah.
It's
And
also
that's
about
right.
how teachers are spending their time. I mean, we've looked at, the admin team had spent, several meetings interviewing different data collection companies and sitting through presentations, and the numbers just come through are so expensive. Some of these programs are so expensive. And it's like you try and balance out need, and that's always just falls to the back burner because we had Google Sheets, but we have all these things like, and like if you just picture all the things in Dibbles, every single one is a column.
Yeah.
And the teachers are entering the data in themselves for every single column. as they test, right? And then we're sorting them and going, okay, now we're building groups and then we're gonna sort again by the next column. That's time you've wasted for data team meetings, it's time, it's what we're doing because it's, you know, it's what we've been able to do. But some of this is one thing that I like about this is that the M class being included, I mean, some of these programs are $8,000 or $10,000 a year annual subscription. I don't know, it depends on typically your number of students. But this being part of it is important to me just because any way we can spend time on the right things and not on the things that are just, you know, it's not a time waster to enter data, but nowadays you should just be able to do the assessment and it's spit it out for you and you've got your groups and you can look at it and you've got the activity set. Then we talk about systematic intervention. That's important for us too, and right now, like, they're taking the data and going, they're trying to build something. Based upon what they see in the data, they're building it themselves, as opposed to going, this is what it works, they can use iReady to do that. But it's probably not as clean.
Yeah, I think that's really, the assessment part seemed really important.
And it's the same assessment we're using, this is just it's where, so we don't have to learn a new assessment. We're already using Dibbles, it's just that now it's online.
Streamlined.
Actually, instead of looking at it on Google Sheets, and actually manipulate it and get lessons. Of that, there's just so many more things we can do with the assessment we're already doing.
I didn't have any other asking questions.
Well, I like that it aligns already with professional development that's been done before. And it seems almost, I mean, it's unfortunate so much time was spent building the curriculum that we approved last year. But it wasn't completely wasted because the training was done and there's pieces in there that can still be used.
That's where she sold me, because I was struggling with the whole program approach. Chris and I have had long conversations about this. I've never been a program person because I really truly believe publishers just slap on Common Core aligned and they sell it out, and this is different. It's, you know, done by educators, it's built differently, and I think that whole program concept is a little bit different now. That was my biggest concern. It was, like, we just lost all this PD we did, and that wasn't the case, and that's where she kind of said, no, we have this, here's where it's in CKLA, we did this, here's where it's in CKLA. And that's what, you know, what the negative feedback was about the program, we've built that knowledge, so.
Well, and a lot of districts are struggling because they have teachers who haven't been trained in letters or UFI, and they don't know, they don't understand all the components of the science of reading. And unfortunately, colleges and universities still aren't teaching those things. So you have brand new graduates coming out who aren't trained in those. And then you start talking about, I don't, were you part of the presentation last year when Aaron came and showed the reading rule?
No.
You weren't part of that. We should probably have you take a look at that, because there's all these components that in Scarborough's rope that bring you to being a good reader and comprehension, background knowledge, decoding, it all weaves together and it shows you how that happens. Amplify seems like a company that aligns with that science of reading and knows that the way children learn how to read, which really, you started talking about it a few years ago. You're like, there's a lot of things we need to be doing that we're not doing. But universities still haven't caught up and a lot of teachers haven't caught up to it. So scores aren't across the country are in bad shape, but Mississippi figured it out and their scores they're an example for the rest of us. And that's where some of this is coming, not just from Mississippi, but they took the information from a study or a few years, more than a few years ago, and started using it, and now it's trickling out into more places. And if you Google science of reading, you'll find a ton of podcasts that talk about all this stuff that Kristen just talked about.
And that's where a lot of our, that's where a lot of what we've been doing for the past several years, it started with that.
And that's our ongoing commitment too. And, you know, Kristen's question to me has always been, how do we keep this going? How do we make it meaningful? You know, we did some things right and we did some things that we could have done better. You constantly reflect on that, but you know, when we have new staff members coming in at the elementary level in particular, they're gonna go through the letters training. They're, you know, we need to make sure that they have that knowledge because they're not coming. Up with those things.
Because teachers are saying, I was 40 years old when I figured out the reason why there's a K at the end of at the beginning of a word, or a CK. Like, and I can say that too. And if you went to school and became a teacher with whole language, that wasn't a piece of it. But now you need to have all of it.
Yeah.
And I think
That's her
we've been
passion.
working really hard at making our teachers in Willington have all those pieces.
And they do, our teachers are incredible, smart teachers, they're ready, so I'm excited for all of us, that should this continue.
It's what would make it work.
It would, I
If we
mean,
didn't have that, I think we'd be having to plan, how do we make sure they're prepared for this? I think other districts are gonna have to have that conversation.
Some of the other programs that were on the list from the state, they're, as you heard, the feedback is not great.
Strong. Yeah, there's some, when you look at the ratings, the rating system is just escaping my brain. That I looked at their overall rating and I'm like, how did they make it in? It was interesting. Cause we pulled all those programs into a spreadsheet just at the start to go, what was the score? What was the overall, what was the feedback?
the, just to go back to something else that you said, Tracy, that Scarborough's rope is in the program guide, so that's that we were just talking about, and those guides, a stack of guides has the Scarborough's rope in there.
Your diagram.
There you
Yeah, it's like in the beginning somewhere, like page 5-ish.
On the
Oh,
big
yeah.
page.
So it's just putting this together, any double way of doing it, but it brings all the pieces that the program has into one piece.
And that's the science of reading.
Mhm.
So next steps for you folks, really. I think kind of, this is my thought, just listening to what your questions were. I think we can get some feedback. Kind of like just interview some principals, find out, or even if it's a literacy coach, you know, I'll have Lisa make some phone calls. I'll have you kind of coordinate if we can get the rep to give us, you know, a list of references. We can reach out and just ask some questions, you know. What are you purchasing every year? Get, you know, our list of things. How are your scores? What, you know, what's gone well, what's not been gone so well. We can get that feedback as an additional piece for us. Cause I think that's where I think removing Kristen from that process is really important, just so somebody else is hearing the same thing. We can align that feedback, and then, get some, we can work, I think, further down the road with pricing, we can get some more feedback around pricing. Have another committee meeting and, you know, I asked if you could take some of the stuff with you and I don't think you can.
It's all digital, all this is digital.
All this is digital, so it'll give you some time to, I'll make sure all of the links that are in your presentation. That go to Google Drive documents, are they all in the same folder where if we give them the email, you will be able to open all those links and look at that stuff. And then. Have a second meeting, just to come back and what you saw, any feedback, additional questions we can do, give you additional information that we gather. And then go from there. What are your thoughts? Anything else that you would want to move forward?
No, I think that would, I think the follow-ups to me, the follow-ups would be schools that are doing existing with this program is important.
Okay,
There might not be a lot of schools in Connecticut necessarily that have been doing this for a long time.
That's fine.
It became very popular once the state approved lists.
yeah,
Sure, but if it's gonna succeed in another area.
Right, you just wanna make sure that-
succeed here, so.
So when
We-
when
we
you're
can
making
go
calls, you
outside
might
the
not
state,
find- yeah,
which
you
is
might not-
okay.
Yeah, just
But
like.
I'd also like to hear like, hey, long-term, short-term, Columbia's in that short-term window for us, like, how's it going, Columbia? You piloted it, what did you notice right away? You know, if you had to do it again, would you do it again? You know, I think those are all important questions.
And it's also important to ask too, like, I mean, is that specific to this program or programs in general?
Right.
Because there are a lot of people that you ask about this program and they might have a lot of negative feedback. And it's like, well, is it because you didn't want to adopt a program? You know, because there's a lot of,
Yeah.
I feel really grateful that we have this opportunity, but I do think there's more people who don't feel grateful for this opportunity. So, you know, that's just something to consider. when
You're
you
saying
do-
in other districts.
Right,
Yeah.
this is, I'm very excited about this, and so are the rest of this, most of the staff, if not all, is also pretty excited about this as well, so. We do see it as an opportunity for some real, positive, growth.
You said it's, K3 falls under the
Right.
grant. So pre-K and 4-8 would be additional.
Right.
Could you, did you get any sample things for pre-K?
It is in the core knowledge, it's on the core knowledge website.
Okay, I'm curious to know if that would even be something that she would be able to implement in the sort of program we have or would choose to.
She said that she can, and she's already starting to try some stuff out, she's very excited.
Okay,
Kristen met with a lot of people.
I've already met with everybody,
Good.
multiple, well, more than once, so I've met with pre-K, we've already had many conversations, so teachers know a lot about this already. And, they know a lot about the other programs too. So when I went and presented this to just about every person that could be impacted by this. And so this is where almost unanimously where everyone's landing is right here and with enthusiasm. So that there was some, you know, concern about when this all first started to transpire, but now it's really just seen as a really tremendous opportunity. We're excited.
change is hard.
And we're excited about it all.
Were there any concerns about, like jumping into something new and needing to backtrack somewhat?
I don't know if I would say concerns,
A lot
it's,
of backtrack is
we've talked about that a lot and where we were, at each grade level, we've looked at units and said, well, what might students need if we're starting this in, you know, second grade and they haven't had that ahead of time, like what are some of the things that students might need in order to access whatever lesson it happens to be. So that's why, you know, an implementation takes a couple of years, so when I talked to teachers today that I met with today, that's what we saw is like, if this is approved, that would be our next steps, is to take a look at,
Yeah, now,
look at
this
unit
year.
one. And what would, you know, look at the pacing, what's realistic? Is there anything that our students will just not be able to do, period? If they don't have something before it, or if we don't do something else that we add in. So we've already done a little bit of looking at that, and it's not been, it just depends on almost every grade level feels pretty confident that just with some scaffolding. In a little more time than they suggest right now, that this would be okay. That would be helpful.
Is there enough PD time or team time to do that before the end of this
There's
year?
never enough time.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's never enough time. I think the big thing for this is, you know, when I think about an administrator doing that, about it, then I say evaluations, that's the wrong term, observations and knowing where people are in curriculum, this is gonna be way easier for them to follow and know where people are at and be able to help. It'll get Kristen back in the classrooms faster, in my opinion. Which is where we want her to be, is working with teachers. I think it streamlines our conversations at meetings as opposed to, okay, so, oh, I don't have that resource, will be somebody go grab that. It just streamlines a lot of different things. So there was feedback in the PD the calendar survey. And I can tell it was from a staff member that just said, you know, is that gonna be another, if we have to do a new ELA curriculum, new program, is that gonna be enough PD? Should we backfill some in the summer? That's again where I'm looking at all the RPESR funds. So I'm not looking at this just from a purchase price. I'm not looking to change the calendar, but we did this last summer where we said, hey, if you're willing to come in and we have some grant funds, we'll pay you to come in. We'll pay you for the day and we'll buy some additional time. I think that might have to be something that we have to look at, but I gotta make sure I have funds for it.
Mhm.
So to me, I'd rather buy the program first and make sure we have it all. And then go, okay, now I have $4,000 left, what's that gonna look like? You know, a day for a teacher is $200. So how many teachers can I get in, how many days? And they also need a break, including the person across from, so who worked a lot last summer. And so all of that is balanced, and that's where, you know, I didn't wanna go too far with our professor. Because number one, I'm trying to offset next year's budget, trying to look at offsetting this year's budget, and then what's the balance? That we have in there that we could use to purchase the remainder pre-K 4-3, if we go this route. So that would be my next homework, to come back with.
Is the 4 to 8 a big chunk, or can you do it by grade level, like 4 or 5 at a time?
So.
No.
The cost, the way they broke it down, because it's, Amplify is through fifth. And so that cost is a little bit higher, I think, and then 6, 7 was lumped together, and that was, I think it was 13 ballpark, 13,000. For 3 years, no, 1 year. 1 year is in my head.
But that's one, is not, that's like one that purchases the.
One
books.
shot deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
It's
and
like
that's,
everything.
why I say, like, we have gone through a bunch of we know we have to adopt from the state perspective.
Yes.
We have a Willington perspective that we wanna make sure we see this through. We're not, the kids don't leave third grade, now they're going to a totally separate
Yeah,
program,
that's what
something
I'm-
different. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
So the right way to do it is look at, you know, soup to nuts, here we go, pre-K to 8, like, if it applies and it's appropriate, let's do it pre-K to 8. My job is to figure out funding and, you know, trying not to come back to her and say, no, we can't do that. How can I identify that? And I think. So I didn't, she knows my response when I come back to her and just say, there's no way we can afford that. I haven't done that. My response right now is, I think I can see some light. I think there's gonna be a way to do it for the other grades as well.
Well, yeah, we have to do this, and then it makes sense to,
Right, the K3, we know we can do. It's in the grant. And if the state can find a way to allow additional wiggle room outside of the K3, which is everybody's complaint.
yeah.
Um, If they do that, or they open up an additional grant or provide additional funds in your grant to do that, we may get some additional funds, and they still have a lot of our BESSER funds at the state. Cause they're seeing people are not spending their money. And it just goes back to the government, so they're trying to they just created that teacher thing where they gave, you know, $1,000, which I'm a little against it, but, cause something like this is more powerful. And didn't include principals or superintendents on it, like they just did it, so. Again, my job is the funding, I gotta figure that out for her, and I'm looking at the grant stuff, so, to do it.
Not trying to piece it together, I would love us to go K3 and then 4-8 and that pre-K as the next second step, so there's only those 2 parts. But if you had to piecemeal, in your professional opinion, would you put 4, 5, 6 in a category together and lump 7, 8 together? Or would you, in your mind, the 6th grade, language arts make more sense with 7, 8?
It's, if, where you're saying, like, we had to decide, like, funding wise?
Year 1 is K5.
Let's say we could like purchase 1 grade, right? We're gonna start with 4, of course, or if you could do a hunk. Do you think that 6th grade fits better with 4, 5? Or maybe make sense there, and then 7, 8 do something different? Or would you think 6, 7, 8 something different and purchase 4, 5?
The thing that's great about 6, 7, 8 is that it's all here pretty much. So
Yeah,
we wouldn't
I mean, in
have to
general,
Purchase,
Okay.
so there, it's the way, and I talked to,
Printing.
well, I talked to somebody, someone asked me a very similar question that today.
6th grade to me is an odd spot, sorry, 6th graders.
Um,
I never know, 5th grade was elementary for a long time, so that I understand, but you have that whole middle school model going on up there, and that starts in 6th grade.
5th grade.
5th grade, oh, yeah.
So I spent time with the 5th grade teacher, language arts teacher today, and the 6th grade language arts teacher today, so we talked a lot about that. And the way that this is structured is amplifies K-5, so we're not going to use the core knowledge for, it's not updated, so we would want to use amplify for K-5. And then 6th grade through 8th grade is its own piece that's all updated on core knowledge, and we can access everything mostly for free, except for some books that you have to purchase that go, like, that core knowledge didn't write. But we were talking about how really this is like a K-5 thing and then a 6-8 thing, because they're really two different, they're not different programs, but they are, like Amplified Guides thing, and then the 6-3 builds upon it and is also integrated into the science and social studies, but it's not with Amplify.
Yeah,
Still,
are they
like,
gonna get their hands on 6 through 8 though?
they
No way to
have,
know.
they do have a 6-3 program, but it fits in that bucket 1. It's Amplify wrote it. Core Knowledge is not involved in it. Core Knowledge has their own.
It'll be better. to stick
Amplify
with
has
that.
their own. And really, like, if I go back to the core of why we're choosing core knowledge, it's just, it's, yeah, that Amplify is a publishing company that came up with, they didn't amplify, they made it themselves. And I feel more confident just from my research and just that Amplify does a better job amplifying things that are already made.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me that Amplify did not have their hands in those upper grades too. But you're right, that's why you're choosing it, is the core knowledge piece, so, okay, that makes sense.
She said she's not an expert yet.
Yeah.
She has a lot of information.
Uh-huh.
I said, you have way more than, I mean, just what you've gathered in a month has been incredible.
Well, it's a huge,
Yeah.
huge undertaking.
Yeah.
This is a long relationship and commitment, so thank goodness we have you, Kristen, to like nitpick every single little thing and know that that diagram's on page 5 of this random program.
I don't know if it was page 5, but it was.
Like seriously, that's,
The
we're in
thing
good
that
hands.
I think she feels important about too is that this would be a good kickoff for the start of next year. And we just were talking about the number of, you know, the number of people in the state that are gonna be buying a new program, and we wanna make sure we get our resources done, right? So we wanna have an approval process early enough that we can get our order in, and if it's gonna be this, get our order in early enough to get it, unpack materials, sort, organize, distribute, so that when we walk in for PD, all that stuff is there. We're not going, hey, we didn't get that yet, or this didn't come in. That's really important too in the rollout portion.
And that's what our representative also recommends, like this, if you can do this sooner than later, then, you know, of course, take the time that you need to make a decision, to make a good decision, but sooner than later is better for that reason. You start getting closer to the end of the year, then it's
Yeah.
back orders and other things that can occur, and this is they're a little tough to access right now, because they're very popular right now, so Janet, you know, I can't just pick up the phone and talk to Janet, like, I need to make an appointment with Janet. So that's our rep.
I would love, and I know I'm gonna push a little bit here, but I would love, a March approval at full board.
Mhm.
Because what that would allow is, it allows us to have a second meeting, which might be hard in the month of February, but get a second meeting in, gives you a couple weeks to fire through links, go through documents, ask questions, which I don't have a problem if you email her directly, honestly, in this situation, because I'm just gonna pass to her. She's the one that is the expert on this. Answer those questions and then come back and we can get the money thing figured out. And then, you know, have that second meeting. As long as you're happy with the answers and make the recommendation, that will allow us to approve in March. Which typically the board would approve based upon your feedback. Kristen could do a brief presentation to the full board in March. You get that full approval, then we could start ordering right away, because our funds for the Right to Read grant are there and ready to go. All we need to do is click and go. Okay, so it's a tight timeline from my push, but I kind of feel like we start getting out into April. There are some times that with these programs, it takes a couple months to get all your materials in. And that doesn't include unpacking everything.
That's only, I mean, it's only the 7th of February, so I would think 3 weeks is reasonable to
Okay,
get all the information back.
Yeah.
That we would need to.
just 3 weeks, give you a long enough time to take her presentation and pick through things and the website stuff, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, does that work for you? Okay. So let us gather some more information, I'll give you a chance to look through materials, if you wanna hang out after the meeting too, look through anything you can. And then I'll have Brenda book something out at least, after 3 weeks from today. And then we'll have more information and we'll go from there. Sound good? Thanks, Kristen, that was a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
much.
much for all of that.
So then we can adjourn, it is 6:11 PM.